Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar, this Toast Studio webinar, where we'll be 1 hour together to discuss the reality, challenges, best practices in influencer marketing. Let me first introduce myself. I'm the co-founder of Toast Studio, Alexandre, and Toast Studio is a content agency located in Montreal, Canada. We're a team of over 25 people dedicated and experts in everything that touches on content marketing, from the strategy to production, and most important, the distribution and amplification. In the past 17 years, our team has worked and produced content for L'Oreal, the National Bank, Bell Media, and we've also produced television programs and series and documentaries for pretty much every Canadian broadcaster. Today, I'm joined with one of our executive producers, David Beebe, who will be leading the conversation. Hey there, David. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. Great.
Excellent.
So I'll let you introduce yourself and your experience, and I guess we'll be able to dive right in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So my background is mainly in, started in television business as storytelling, producing both television and digital content, webisodes and derivative content, live programming, and then switched to the brand side. As you know, brands are becoming storytellers now. So went and launched the Marriott Content Studio, the real-time marketing hub, working with influencers, which is what we're going to talk about today and go through sort of the state of influencer marketing as it's really transitioning and going into really sort of a second phase as it's starting to grow up.
Great, great. So I'll let you dive right in. I'm just having a slight problem setting up the presentation here. But what I'll do is that, there we go. It should be coming up within a couple seconds, but I'll let you start right away.
Okay, great.
While I get this on the screen. All right, so it's coming up. So in the meantime, everyone, don't hesitate. There's a chat room live with this webinar, so don't hesitate to ask questions. We're there for you. We're there to answer your questions. So if there's anything, don't absolutely hesitate. It's there for that. Everyone is there to also chat around, so don't hesitate to join the conversation. So I'm just going to type in a little something here and get this on the screen. All right.
There we go.
First up. There we go. I'll let you control it, David, from now on.
Okay. Let me get the... Oh. There we go. All right, we'll dive in. So influencer marketing is, people are well aware, is one of the biggest buzzwords. It's the new shiny object in brand marketing. But it actually can work when it's done right. And it does have the power to really reach and engage and impact consumers across all kinds of channels and actually drive sales and business and actually build a loyalty with consumers. So we're going to go through today different types of influencer marketing, how brands are using it, how do you do a deal, where do you even start, how do who do you choose, and how do you measure.
And I think the market really, from what you've seen, I guess, is really, you've seen, there are some very sketchy ways of influencer marketing programs and sketchy things going around. And there are others that are really well structured. And I think the problem is that everyone has so many questions in regards to that because you don't always get the same quality in terms of the relationship. And that, I think that's key.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where there's so many different types. And that's what, as far as it's still the wild, wild west. And that's where, it's starting to mature a little bit. And I'd say going into that second phase. But there's still a lot of work to be done to get it to a place where it's really consistent. Everyone understands what they're doing and how they're doing it so that the industry, can actually grow and be a little bit more professional. Just up here, some quick stats on how brands are using influencers. Look, everyone is pretty much in the game, whether it's B2C, whether it's B2B. And so, I know I've worked with a ton of influencers in my television days and digital days, producing shows for Yahoo and YouTube, and also on the brand side in all kinds of ways. So we're going to actually talk about some real examples as well as we dive in here. One thing that's important to note is the difference between celebrity influencers and digital creators or influencers. Your celebrity influencers were, those were your traditional sort of quote influencers before digital came out, and YouTube and Instagram, and those people built followings. And so these are your typical musicians, actors, athletes, etc. They've built sort of their brand through traditional sort of things like sports or television, and the social aspect of what they do is typically part of a larger deal. They're not influencers first. They have other things going on. Whereas your digital creators, your bloggers, your YouTubers, even photographers, that's their primary channel, and they are there to creating an audience, and they are creating content that audience wants, that they come back for every day. And that's where brands have the opportunity to authentically integrate into those stories or co-produce content with those influencers to tap into those audiences. So where do you start? Like I said, a lot of brands, I've seen a ton of them, they get excited about it. They get a budget, which is great. And then they go out and they find an influencer, they do something, and then it doesn't necessarily work. And it goes back to, kind of what we talked about in last week's webinar, is the idea, like, really starting with the purpose of it. Do you know why you want to work with an influencer? Do you know what the outcome is you want it to be? Is it to drive sales? Is it to change perception of a brand? Who are the right ones to work with? So there's a lot of, I think the strategy part is key. And that's the first thing you need to do before you actually even go out and decide, that you want to do this. Like I said, it can work, but it's got to be backed by a strong strategy. Otherwise, the influencer ends up unhappy, the brand ends up unhappy, and the consumer or that person's fan essentially can tell that something went wrong along the way because the content isn't that good or authentic.
And the execution will be very different if a brand is going for awareness rather than actual conversions or sales.
Absolutely.
And that needs to be aligned from the beginning.
Yep. So, there's a lot of ways to go out and find influencers. There are platforms out there that you can use, that you can essentially put in and say, look, I'm this type of brand. I'm looking for this type of influencer that has this type of audience and does this type of content. And in some cases, those are automated systems. Those tend to be more your, I want a influencer to insert my product into their show, their content somehow. So it's not a lot of, I would say, human behind it in a sense of thinking. It really truly is automated in a sense. There are some other platforms that do the same thing, but there's a little bit more people behind it. And then there's all the way to, someone that you want to work with that has built up a big audience, and you're going to reach out to their manager, their agent, and talk to them about actually co-creating content versus an integration into content. So these are all things that you need to think about. The type of integrations you want to do, the type of influencer marketing you want to do, and your goals. There's no shortage of these platforms out there that do these matching. I think there's a new one popping up every day. They're all primarily the same. And they claim to be a little bit different. It's not my preference to use them. I would prefer, because what we do in Toast is much more story driven. So it's really about having a relationship and finding the right one, spending time with them, versus the automation process.
Yeah, and the automation process is almost like my business partner David here, Pierre Pan, was mentioning that basically those platforms and or those agencies that say we'll be able to find from a brief, we'll be able to find someone. They're basically casting agencies. So it's basically the same reflexes that happened when the casting agencies were doing their work in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, where they wanted sometimes to find the perfect person to execute a certain script, or sometimes they just want to star. And depending on the director, that would take very different routes.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if you're just trying to do a basic, I have a product and I want to identify X amount of influencers to take my product and promote it, and what they're doing, and you're going to give them a list of what to say, not to say, the hashtags and signs, then, it can work. But I'm much more a fan of creating content that is really authentic to the audience, where you're actually sitting down with the influencer and co-developing the idea, so that it's not so much an integration, and their viewers don't mind, because they're actually they're more proud that the brand is enabling the creator, the influencer, to do what they do in an authentic way, versus holding up a can of whatever, or the latest protein powder, or what it may be, whatever it may be. So there's all kinds of different ways into there. So who do you work with? We just talked about that. There's agencies you can work with, the platforms. You can partner directly with the influencers themselves. There's all kinds of ways to do this, and this is part of the I don't want to say a fun part, but it really truly is still there's no standardization to it yet. And so my personal process from building and producing content with influencers, people like Terrence Southern, Casey Neistat, some of the Sean Duras, bigger ones, is really to sit down and approach them and say, look, we want to create a travel show. We want to create a whatever. We want to do a takeover. And we think you'd be the great creative partner. Let's hear your ideas. Here's our ideas of what we're trying to achieve. And how do we do that in an authentic way, where the brand, the product, is just part of the story versus interrupting it. And that's, I think, where you see the most success. Again, going back to the idea of it's really driven by story, and their fans, appreciate it. One of the most successful things that I did at Marriott was actually we did a takeover with Sean Duras, a Snapchat takeover, where he took over the Marriott Hotels channel. And it was crazy insane in terms of engagement. He would say, come to a particular hotel, meet up there. He would meet his fans. He would ask his fans where he should go around the world. We would send him there. He would create content along the way, and it was just authentic to what he does.
And it was on a Marriott property, so he was able to kind of bring his audience to Marriott.
Yeah, so it was not only a sort of online on app engagement, it was actually an in-person experience too, which can work for experiential brands. And that's the thing. Think about how you can content and influencer marketing can extend to experiences as well, versus just having a dead end on the platform and doing an integration or a story. How can your brand actually engage with those people in real life as well?
And was the takeover his idea, or did you come up with the idea and then try to find who could take it over?
We did first we developed in-house what we wanted to do. So we wanted to partner with travel influencers to take over the channels and drive back and forth. He was one of the ones that we included, so we did 5 people in total. And it was a different one every month, essentially, so it was a long program. And that's the other thing we'll talk about here as well, is that you want to try to work with influencers over time, and we'll talk about how you structure those deals. So when we look at all the different content types, we briefly touched on this as well. So you can have, as I mentioned, a straight integration. You can have someone do a full-fledged scripted movie that's an influencer. You can have them do original content. And so it's, it's called influencer marketing because the audience they have, they really are I say that they're your new type of media companies. They bring the creative, they bring the audience, right? And they bring the distribution. So they're really a new form of media company, not just an influencer. And in fact, many of them really get annoyed when you say you're just an influencer, with an audience.
They bring a lot to the table in this equation.
Yeah, they can bring a lot to the table, and they are influential. But many of them have gone on to launch massive businesses outside of creating content every day. And another way to think about working with content types and influencers is you can actually do events. So I've done where we will sponsor an event like a music concert like Coachella or something, and we'll send the influencer down, and they'll do a whole create content over the weekend, on the way down there, on the way back, and capture everything that happened. That's another way in real life to engage with an influencer. And so there's a lot of different ways. It's not just what a lot of people see on Instagram of, oh, I got a product in the mail, let me open it up and talk about it. You've got influencers who are actually creating really entertaining content all the way to actually movies. So when I produced scripted movies and even unscripted documentaries and television shows for Marriott, we actually would cast a mix of talent in the film. So it would be, you would have traditional movie talent, you would have people from TV, and then you would also have people from YouTube or Instagram. The idea there was that we wanted to attract the largest audience from all types of screens. So it wasn't let's just put a movie, or let's just take a movie, cast a person in it, and then hopes people watch it online. It was like, let's get everyone from multiple screens.
Is that your fire alarm?
That's our wonderful fire alarm in our building, in the office building here, but it's they're just testing, so it should shut off shortly.
Okay, perfect. Be safe. Be safe. If you need to go outside, please do, and we'll take that.
They're just testing it, which they listen. But it's always the wrong time to test it.
All right, perfect.
So they'll hold on 1 second, and it'll be done.
There you go. That's a confirmation that was a test.
There we go. So hopefully you'll get to hear how they're testing it.
Perfect.
Deal types. So the deal types can range as sort of, as I mentioned, if you're doing an automated system, you're going to get like an automated deal. The numbers are going to be sort of pre-built in. You're going to know exactly what you're going to get, you know, how long it lasts, how many posts, and it's pretty straightforward. On the other end of the spectrum, you can actually do like an overall deal where the influencer is part of your brand and your campaign for a period of time. So let's say you want to do like a 3-month deal, a 6-month deal, or a 1-year deal with them, where they're going to create content for you. They're going to come speak at your brand or your business. They're going to appear at events. They're going to essentially be the face of your company in many ways, or your brand.
So it's still a spokesperson, basically, on that type of deal.
Yeah. So I'll give you another example with people like Bill Rancic, who's a traditional television, celebrity, all the way to again Taryn Southern. We would put them, once we knew we wanted to work with them, we would do a test with them essentially. So we do it like a one-off, but we'd say, look, if this works, we'd like to do a longer deal with you. And so that you can get to know us better, you can pick the right brand to work with, and it's more authentic to your audience, and you can actually produce different types of content. So brands can actually do that, and it's more valuable, I think, to do an overall deal, because again, they're going under that deal, they're going to develop a certain amount type of content. They're going to pitch you, you'll pitch them. You're getting to know their audience better. You're seeing what works. And it just becomes a better relationship versus them showing up, doing an event, getting their check, and going home.
And how do you establish the list of deliverables that should be connected to your brand? Because they're not going to be doing, for that period, they're not going to be doing 100% content on your brand specifically. They might have other integrations that they'll be working with. So I guess it won't be an exclusive thing. Well, there is some exclusivity as well. So depending on the industry you're in, you may want to put exclusivity clauses in there that they can't work with other competitors. So we would do, like in the hotel business or in the auto business, whatever, you would say during the term of this agreement, you cannot work with, X amount of competitors. Because we don't want you to, we don't want you in our campaign, and then 3 months later you see in someone else's campaign. So the exclusivity is typically, if you're going to do like an overall deal, it goes back to like the development deals in Hollywood, where you would sign an actress or an actor, and they were part of your studio for many years, and you would develop films with them, over and over. Yep. They didn't work with other studios. And that factor really does help. You can get an exclusivity per vertical, per industry, but in the end, I think that what you said is that the fact that you're not doing a one-off really will help. In the beginning, you will get some results, but it will get better as you move along.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's, when it comes to the, what people are being paid, this is a really big deal, or I'd say a problem in the industry, is that there's no consistency to what a influencer is getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
So one brand might be paying them, $1,000. Another brand might be paying them 10,000. I had an example before where I was paying an influencer, let's say 10,000. Another brand was paying them close to $100,000 for this same thing. And so that's where there's no consistent deal template. There's no consistent price. Of course, they're valued off their audience and engagement and all the other metrics they provide and what they're going to ultimately do for you. But the numbers are all over the place. And there's just really no consistency thing. Unlike in acting, in Hollywood, there's you have your base rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's your sort of the rate you come in as an actress, right? Your SAG minimum, and then it goes up there based on how big you are, very very much like an influencer. So, but there's just it's insane to see some of the deals. There's different legally. There's different rules in different country. For example, in the States, and in many countries, they have to actually indicate that they are being paid
Right.
by the brand as an ad, and the FTC makes it really hard and ambiguous to understand what do they actually have to do. There's no clear they don't tell you what you have to say. They say you have to indicate, and they give you some examples. And a lot of influencers have gotten in trouble from the FTC because they didn't indicate that
Mm-hmm.
a brand had sponsored them or paid for them. Or they didn't do it in a clear enough way. And so it varies country by country. And so that's where, another problem where they want to make sure that the viewers are understand that what they're saying about that product or what they're engaging with, that if they were paid or not.
Right, right. And the same thing's happening, and I think it's so new for the government bodies to really be able to put a sandbox around these things, and it evolves so quickly. And I mean, it's not their biggest quality for any level of government being able to move that quickly. So I think it's going to be a challenge
Yeah.
for the years to come. But the other thing you mentioned is that the pricing being so all over the place. Are you seeing, or have you seen someone or an organization or an association really starting to try and get a grasp on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are organizations trying to, they're stepping up, and there's a lot of companies that are involved in this space that are trying to standardize it. It's just hard to do because the challenge is there's no one central place for an to go initially if you want to work with an influencer, right? So you could go to the manager, you go to the agent, you could, and oftentimes you don't know. Sometimes they're signed with a multi-channel network, like a full screen,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets very confusing who actually represents them. I had an example. I had a show pitched to me, it was created by an influencer, pitched to me by 6 different people last year, all 6 claiming that they represented that influencer in the show. And ultimately, I was like, who am I actually dealing with here? Because because the industry isn't regulated and doesn't have a standardization to it, everyone's trying to get their like 10% or their fingers in the
Mm-hmm.
pie in a sense.
Yeah.
And so what I would always do and always recommend is that you go directly, you find out who their manager is or their agent, and that's the person you deal with, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's the person that quote represents them, versus going through someone else who may be attached to the project or be a friend of theirs. And that's where you're seeing the wild numbers come from. And people also talk in the industry of what they're paying, and brands are starting to share information, which is good, and deal types and the templates, and saying, hey, make sure you include this. One example is it's really important to include is if oftentimes your deal will have where the influencer posts on social media, obviously, right? So
Mm-hmm.
something that they're doing, whether it's a show they created or whatever, and there's the hashtags or your tagging you want them to do. I've experienced before where an influencer that I worked with on a campaign posted it. They put the wrong hashtags. They misspelled things. They didn't tag the right people, the right companies. And we asked them and said, hey, can you go in and where you can edit these and or delete and redo them? And their answer was no. They're like,
Really?
I posted what you told me to post. And so it's and part of that problem is professionalism in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, a lot of these influencers are 19, 20, 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
making the big ones are making millions of dollars a year. And they're not the most business savvy, so they don't understand. In their eyes, they're like, no, I posted it, versus maybe I should go back and redo this because I want to build a relationship. But a lot of them don't see that. Now, on the other hand, there's
Yeah.
a lot of professional ones when you're putting a deal together that will work with you to make the deal terms, good for both parties. They'll tell you things that they should have in there, that you should have in there. And there's a lot of professional ones that operate their channels like a business versus just, I'm doing a campaign for a brand.
Yeah. Right.
So, some of the platforms here, we've talked about some of them already. You can look on influencers across different ones. YouTube tends to be the biggest one in terms of creators creating content. And then obviously Instagram is big. Instagram, you get a lot more of your integrations of, put my product into your story, post something at my event, those kind of integrations. You don't, because Instagram's limited to video. It's not like you're doing original programming there. YouTube is more where you're seeing, I'm creating a series of content for a brand. I'm doing a webisode series. I'm going to go cover an event for a weekend and create, 10 videos. I'm doing a travel vlog, whatever it may be. That's much more where your story driven stuff. And of course you have influencers on other platforms as well. They typically tend to syndicate out to, Facebook and Twitter, obviously included, and then their website and what other traffic they have. And there's other platforms where there's influencers, but I think you're seeing a lot of brands use primarily your YouTube or your Instagram, quote, stars or creators.
And have you seen in those the main two platforms being Instagram and YouTube? Have you seen better quality on one or the other, or is basically so much a question of the actual influencer that there's both types of content, really good and really huge fails on all platforms?
Yeah, I think it's it's by the platform. It's different. You've got,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, Instagram tends to be much more I'm at an event, I'm being sponsored by, I'm inserting a
Mm-hmm.
product into my feed, into my post, tagging them. Where YouTube tends to be much more I'm going to create something that's actually story driven, multiple part. And of course, they go back and forth. So if you're going to do something on YouTube, you're also going to post something on Instagram, obviously. But it's where the main influencers, and there's other influencers on a bunch of other apps, Musically, and whatnot, and they're all different audiences. They're different demographics you're reaching. Obviously, Snapchat has a ton of influencers on there. I find with Snapchat that the best way for a brand is to actually partner with an influencer on the platform to create original content versus buying advertising on Snapchat, because advertising on Snapchat is interruptive to the viewer's experience, right? So you're watching your feed and then an ad pops up, and that's interruptive marketing. Versus if I go and sponsor a travel influencer or a sports influencer, I'm, as a brand, being integrated into their feed so it doesn't interrupt it. And hopefully it's done in an authentic way where it's not so in your face, but they also understand that, you are being supported by a brand.
Right.
Attention.
Hold on one second
We'll
here.
be testing
Yeah.
the elevators in the building. Elevators will be ground.
All right. So I know for a fact that you're in a new building, so they're still building parts of it. So
They're still
that comes with the territory.
All right, measurement. So this is the big thing, right, with influencer marketing is how do you know is a success? What metrics do you look at? How are you measuring it? What tools do you use? So this is really, I think, where the industry is going to change. Besides the deals and what people are getting paid, is really measurement. That's sort of the next thing to figure out, because in the past, and by past I mean 6 months ago and prior, you would be able to, there was actually an agency that did this, that went out and created fake Instagram accounts, and went on to these automated platforms and sold them to, and started doing deals with brands, and they were fake. So because in the beginning, brands would look at a YouTuber or a Instagram channel and say, oh, they've got 1 million followers or 50,000 or 5, and oh, look at this, and they'd get super excited. They do a deal, and then they'd be like, oh, well, how did that work for us? Did it actually drive sales? Did it move product? Did it change brand perception? Whatever it was. Nowadays, you're actually seeing brands get smarter and say, okay, not only do I want to see your followers, I want to see engagement numbers, and I want to see the comments, and I want to see what people are actually saying, and I want to see a lot more data. So they're having to share actually a lot more private data than you can see on their channel, to make sure that it actually aligns correctly, and then also know how they're going to measurement. So here's where it gets interesting, is with the platforms. And even if you're working with an influencer directly, you are essentially getting numbers from them, reporting, of what worked, what didn't, views, engagement, all that stuff, and obviously sales if you're doing links and whatnot. But it's self-reporting, meaning the platform or the agency or whoever it may be is giving you those numbers. And I think that is like grading your own homework and in school. Because
there's a good chance to give yourself a good grade.
Yeah, of course you're going to tell the brand that the campaign did brilliantly and they should come back and do more. Now, I'm not saying that these platforms, these people are intentionally lying necessarily, but there is a lot of ad fraud. There's a lot of view fraud, and you look at from companies like Facebook and Google. So, and then you've got a lot of other platforms, smaller ones. There's another one right now that just came out in the news that is close to admitting over 60% of their traffic is fake.
Who was that? I missed that one.
It's a platform. I forget the name of it, and I don't want to say their name or necessarily claim.
No, I guess it's not. No. But 60% is huge.
But it is in the news, and so it's a problem. And so, one of the companies that I work with and actually found it when I was at Marriott, our influencer marketing was called Silo, and they do independent third-party measurement. So they are not. They have no horse, in the race in terms of they don't pick the influencers. They don't get involved in the creative. All they do is plug into essentially the creators' platform data, the data from brand, and whoever else is involved, and they bring all that data in and then analyze it. And they have a whole platform that they built out and hired a bunch of smart data scientists. And they're actually able to give back, verify the data and real numbers, and give what they call Silo
It's not
score.
the influencer providing data to Silo. It's actually Silo plugging itself directly to the platform and pulling the real numbers from the
platform. So they're actually pulling the numbers from the platform. They're pulling the numbers from the influencer themselves as well. So they're getting access to all that. And wherever else it's running, ad servers and whatnot. So they are then pulling all that. They're verifying it. Is it real traffic? They're reporting out a bunch of metrics, and then they assign what they call a Silo score to it, meaning that influencer and what their essentially score is. So think of it like Nielsen TV, essentially, right? Nielsen TV the States is monitors viewing for television shows and reports those out. It's the same thing. I mean, imagine if TV stations and cable channels did their own reporting. That's what's happening in influencer marketing. They're giving their own numbers out. So third-party independent verification is huge, and I think will become more and more important because, like I said, the other ones, they can provide the same data, but it's their data essentially, and they're not. You don't necessarily know, is it real? How do they get there? You don't know their process or anything else. They want to sell you, hey, look, this whole thing looks amazing. Come back and spend another $100,000 with us. And so beyond that, obviously with measurement, you want, engagement is really key. And so I've seen influencers that are really micro influencers that have maybe 20,000, 50,000 followers, even less, get more engagement on their post than influencers in the 100,000, 200, 500,000 million range. Oftentimes, because
this is because their audience is of better quality.
Right, exactly. Oh, my presentation went. Where'd it go?
Yeah, no, I'm just sharing. For those interested, we were just talking about Silo. It should be coming up on the screen. If it's not, I'm just mentioning it. It's meetsilo.com. So MEETSYLO.com. So let me just bring back the presentation here.
So it's that's engagement's really key, because you can put something out and get 10,000 likes on it or 10,000 views, but what does that actually mean? What I want to know as a brand is what are people saying about it? Are they liking it? Are they sharing it? What are people saying about my brand? Do they understand that I'm part of it? And I actually, obviously, with sales, I mean, you can track that with links and whatnot, but it goes beyond. Go back to the engagement. It's so important, because if you look at a lot of, especially Instagram, so-called influencers, they'll post something, and then you'll go through the comments, and it's like a bunch of like smiley faces or cool post, or it's not like any engagement, and those tend to be your bots. And I would rather work with a handful of smaller influencers that actually have true engagement and true fans, versus someone who went out and bought 200,000 followers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quality is so key. And how do you test? Do you know how? Is there a way to know? Are there tools that would help someone know what is happening? What is a good quality audience, or what's a fake audience?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools out there. There's also Meet Silo. Silo actually does that, because they'll plug in and analyze all the data as well. There's also tools out there that'll say, look, you think you have an audience that likes, let's say, food, and that's what you've been posting, but your audience actually also likes travel or fashion, and so you can use Silo and other tools out there to actually identify other opportunities for yourself as an influencer, but also as a brand, to say, you might have thought that person was really influential in whatever category, but they can also be influential in another category based off their data.
Right. That tool seems really interesting, and it's something where we're testing out at Toast, and I think that the fact that, and it's true for influencer marketing, but it's also true for media. Media has that same exact problem, where some creative agencies are reporting, or media agencies are reporting numbers that are not necessarily verifiable.
Right,
and
exactly.
That's one thing that needs to be fixed. If there's going to be so much money being invested, I mean, there needs to be a way for it to be verified.
Yep, absolutely. I think we got time for Q&A here. If we got any questions from folks on the webinar, or we can other questions you want to bring up.
One question that came in was this was from someone here. How do you separate? How can I say it? Can you really bring the no, sorry. I'm just trying to go back here. And it's the importance of bringing that person to the table really early on. And it's really the fact that you cannot just dictate your brief or actually how it's going to be executed. And but that's one thing when you bring them to the table. But after that, although you have a content creator, for example, let's not say necessarily celebrity, but a content creator, how often have you seen them being open to be tagging along with a production company to work on an actual campaign for their own properties rather than them creating the content themselves? Have you seen a lot of brands that say, I want to be able to reach your audience, but the way you're producing things in the past, I don't know, a couple months, I'd like my production company to come on and really raise the bar in terms of production quality.
Yeah, it varies. I think, look, if you're an influencer, it varies on the type of content, right? And you're absolutely right that you have to start with your creator, your influencer, whatever you want to call them, at the beginning stages of any project. You just can't say, "Hey, go make this for me," otherwise it's not authentic. So that's super important, and that way you can actually co-develop the stories together, and the audience appreciates that more. Next gen audiences understand that brands need to market and advertise. I mean, everyone knows that, but they appreciate when you do it in a way that's authentic, that's transparent, that isn't in your face, and they're more likely to engage in your brand and actually trust your brand. Now, if you're going to if you're a brand that says, "Hey, I want to partner with an influencer and we're going to make a documentary or a short film or whatever it may be," depending on the influencer, that's typically where the production company will come on board and work with the influencer and the brand to manage the entire process from A to Z. Because while the influencer is part of the talent, they're bringing the creative, they're helping develop the idea, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure that a production company does. Everything from payroll to accounting to equipment to talent, all of those resources in-house. They're great at creating content on YouTube, but if you're going to pull them into a larger production, then yeah, you're seeing certainly brands are, they either have their trusted sort of production company partners, or a production company can go to an influencer and say, "Hey, let's develop something together." Or make a partnership, and then you're not going to fully develop the idea, but then you'll say, "Hey, this would be great for brand X," and you build a relationship with that brand, and then you can develop that idea that way as well. Sometimes, most of the time, a lot of brands develop ideas in house. They know what they want, and sometimes honestly they don't know what they want. And so you always kind of have to have ideas on the table. I'm a big fan of coming up with a top line idea, meaning, we want to do a travel show. We want to do whatever. It's going to look, kind of like this. It's going to be 6 episodes. Then you go and find the right brand, the right production company, whatever it may be, to go and execute it and sit down with a brand where you are actually developing it together versus fully developed project. Go to the brand with the influencer and say, "Hey, here's how I'm going to put your brand into my project. Give me $100,000.
Yeah, and those we know, and we've discussed about this in the past, you and I, actual finalized projects or projects that are considered finalized by any type of creator. Could be a screenwriter, could be an influencer or an Instagrammer or a YouTuber coming to a brand and pitching. The success rate of those is so low that really there's a lot of energy that is taken into pitching those projects to brands and creating it first. And there's a lot of disappointment when, although you thought the brand would be jumping in the air by reading your pitch, they're not. And there are so many variables coming in that there's timeline, there's budgets, there's actual business objectives that are not that may not be aligned. The internal objectives for the next quarters might not be the ones that you can notice in current campaigns. So sometimes brands are preparing for what's coming along, and there's no way for someone to know who's not at the table at that time. So really creating that relationship and really creating that co-creating, actually, which is another huge buzzword at the moment.
Yep.
Really co-creating the concept is key. Everyone brings ideas to the table, and when you put all of them together, it doesn't become a creation by committee. It really becomes co-creation because everyone chimes in with what they need, and actually that makes for a better product in the end when it's done properly. So great. There was David in the chat room that was mentioning FameBit that Google, actually YouTube started.
Yep.
That's one thing. There are so many platforms that currently are either representing influencers, YouTubers, and such, and or brands, platforms like Silo that's trying to bridge the two by measuring as a third party. Really, the industry and the ecosystem is extremely alive and extremely exciting, but you have to test, ask questions. As a brand executive, be sure to really get to know the platform. And I'm talking about services, maybe more than platforms. Right. When you mentioned platforms, you were saying YouTube and so on. So the service providers that are there to help. Could be an agent, could be an agency, could be an actual search platform. Be sure to get to know them. Be sure to know what's on there. Try to get references of people who've worked with them together. Because what happens is if you do a Google search currently to find any of those services, every week you'll get different results. And that's because it's moving at a really, really, really fast pace. And I cannot say this enough. As a brand marketer, if you're going direct with the influencers and or those services, you need to be extremely in the know about what you are getting yourself into. Not because it's that risky, but you could be disappointed with the actual end results.
Yeah, absolutely. So that can also happen if expectations aren't clear, at the beginning of what's delivered, and kind of like you said, it's that the brand doesn't have those sort of production storytelling resources in-house either. Mm. Right, they exactly. Don't. So that's where, you can bring, you don't want to bring everyone to the table. You don't need 20 people, but your core sort of talent and resources, you want to make sure you have that at the beginning. And you said everyone, kind of comes to the table, and I would say sort of drops their ego in a sense, and it's not worried about who's paying for what, who's doing. It's more of a conversation of thinking consumer first and viewer first, and how do we create something that the viewer's actually going to want to watch, and then how does our brand become part of that story versus saying, I'm brand X, I want my logo, I want my product, I want to do this. Consumers don't want to watch that. And so if you sit down and sort of everyone just talks about how do we actually create something that consumers want to watch and that they'll share and they'll talk about, that's a much better approach than just essentially going out and creating an ad, which is what you will get with an influencer if you don't know what you're doing there.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I guess there's David that's mentioning again that said, could we get a Yelp to review those services? So I guess if it's not there already, it's going to be there soon. So that pretty much wraps it up. We're almost 1 hour in. So we're going to let everyone go. Going to wish you a great week, everyone. And next week, we won't be doing a webinar as we're doing a Content Decoded Masterclass here in Montreal. So we'll be in Montreal doing a one-day, full-day workshop. If you need to know anything, you can go to the Toast Studio website and be sure to get all the information. We'll also be in Toronto shortly and other cities in North America. So don't hesitate. I wish everyone a great week. David, thank you. Live from Toronto and your alarm system test.
I know.
And I hope everything's going to be okay. And talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks. Bye.